The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus has said to the people, I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats of this bread will live forever. And the bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. The people then disputed among themselves, saying, How can this man give us his flesh to eat? So Jesus said to them, Very truly I tell you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink of his blood, you have no life in you. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise them up on the last day. For my flesh is true food, and my blood is true drink. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me, and I in them. Just as the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so whoever eats me will live because of me. This is the bread that came down from heaven, not like that which your ancestors ate, and they died. But the one who eats this bread will live forever. Jesus said these things while he was teaching in the synagogue at Capernaum. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
I'd like to spend a little bit of time with our first reading, and there's three key kind of words to ponder in that reading, and one of them is remembering. One was remembering, and another one is testing us, testing our endurance, and the third is the concept of manna, what that really means. Now, when we think of remembering, we think of the Hebrew people, we think of the Israelites coming out of Egypt at the prompting of God through Moses, and Moses leading his people out. And this is from Deuteronomy, this first reading, which is kind of a summary of the first 5 books of the Bible, which are very much attributed to Moses himself. And so Moses is speaking to his people. He's kind of summing up their experience to date. And he's speaking in a way that's trying to help them recall who they are, what they've been through, however challenging it was. But ultimately, God is with them, and God has been with them from the beginning. And he's speaking to a people who are starting to forget. People who maybe have been in the desert maybe too long for some, however that is, but he's calling them, he's reminding them. He calls to the minds and hearts of his people that they do have a history that they need to remember, and that their history is sacred, and when they reflect upon their past, they remember where they came from, and they'll trust in their futures. Remembering our past and remembering their past, and it's a reminder to us. Are we remembering our past? What brought us here today even? What keeps bringing us back? What is it about our faith that has inspired us to keep moving forward? And in the process of whatever that was, through our baptism, through experiences in life that have led us along in our Christian path, there's something that inspires us to keep moving. And sometimes we have to look back to certain moments in our lives to re-inspire us, to remind us who we are, that we're children of God. Because the world can get to you after a while, and certainly with this pandemic, it can get to us after a while. And we can start to forget and wonder and ask the questions, well, what about these regulations? What about this length of time without Mass? I've never known anything like that in my life before. How do I navigate through this? And for many, this is going to be, as Father John said, it's a time of fasting, and it's a time where a greater appreciation of the Eucharistic celebration and gathering in community will come out of this. And that can be a wonderful thing. But we must remember that it's not, the other danger is that we fall away. And we say, well, what's the use? And that's kind of what the Israelites were going through at a time. And Moses is speaking to them at that, in that kind of circumstance where they're starting, well, what's the use, you know? And some of them are saying, well, you know, at least we got better meals back in Egypt, but they were forgetting how miserable life was back then. And they were forgetting that God has freed them from slavery, a much bigger deal than the nitpicky complaints of everyday life. And so we as human beings need to remember. We need to be a people who recall our past. And the second is testing. The Israelites spent 40 years in the desert having their memories tested. How long can we hold a grace-filled memory of our past such that it continues to sustain us in the present? After spending a prolonged period in the desert, the Israelites, as I said, started to forget about the amazing reality of the Exodus and their freedom from slavery. And for us today, this pandemic has been going on for a long time. How long before we start to squirm and doubt and maybe lose faith in our leadership and all of those things? So what memories or thoughts and beliefs and inspirations are sustaining us? Parents are experiencing a new reality of what parenting is really all about, aren't they? Married couples are seeing a side of themselves and of their spouses that perhaps they haven't seen or have never before seen because they've never had the chance to spend that much time together before. Before this pandemic, it was a lot easier to avoid showing or revealing our weaknesses and our vulnerable side because we could endlessly defer facing those issues, certain issues that we never want to talk about. We're always on the fly and too busy and preoccupied. This pandemic has changed that. We're in each other's faces more, you know, and that's challenging. So new realizations are occurring, and some are wonderful and some are pleasant realizations about ourselves and about each other and how we handle this. But there's also painful and awkward and difficult realizations that are being revealed as well that we have to navigate through. I've recently been going through old cards and photographs and mementos from my past. I haven't had a lot of time to do that over the years, but I've had some time in the last month and a half or so, more time in looking through some of my old stuff. And old stuff is right. I mean, I'm thinking the next chance to have a garage sale or get rid of some stuff, can certainly do that. But among all the kind of junky stuff that this just has no meaning or need, I have no need for anymore, I can't hang on to it all, but there are reminders. Among them, there's reminders for me of where I came from. And there's certain things, oh, I remember this, or I remember that person, and I completely forgot about this little part of my life. And I'd forgotten that I had journaled all the way through my trip on the Camino several years ago. I had little reflections every day, and I noted where I was. And I had forgot I ever did that. You know, it's just life moves so fast after a while. And other things, going back to earlier in life, things that kind of help remind me of my struggles in the past and good things that have happened. And they encompass happy memories as well as challenging and heartbreaking memories, you know. But those are all things that, excuse me, those are all things that help remind me who I am and where I came from and have their own part to play in orienting me for the future. And it's true for all of us, you know, to remember our past. There's happy memories and very sad memories, you know. To look at where we came from can sometimes stir up more gratitude for where we are today. Look at what I got through. Look at where I am today. Look at the many happy memories and the people I met along the way. Here's where I am today. It's hard if we completely forget our past and are trying to navigate through this, float around in our present. It's disorienting, and we can lose a sense of our identity. And that's part of what the Hebrew people were about, and our Old Testament and the Torah is about recalling our history. And it sets us up for the future. Where have we come from? Where are we going? Who do we belong to? And then finally, the point about manna. That fundamental nourishment that's basic, it's nothing fancy, but it comes from God because it sustains us. And it's not just about sustaining the body. The manna in the desert sustained the body, but it was something that their ancestors never heard of before. But all of a sudden it was there. It was provisional for them. It came from God. And today, our image of manna can be many things. It's certainly not the same as that, but it's what is it that sustains us in our lives? Something from God that we didn't expect, or was different from what our ancestors received. And Jesus alludes to that same image in the gospel. That manna from heaven, that spiritual nourishment that sustains us. And again, it's nothing fancy, but it's precious. And when we celebrate the Eucharist, we are recalling the Exodus. We are recalling the freedom from slavery. We are recalling that Paschal meal that was celebrated before the escape to freedom. The Last Supper is about Jesus' death and resurrection, that escape to freedom, to which we're all invited. We're all invited to that same table with him. And we recall our past through the Eucharistic celebration. We are bringing it to the present. We are living it now. Each time we celebrate the Eucharist, we are living that threshold of movement from death to resurrection, and living among the people of God and learning more and more what it means to be children of God, children of light, bread broken and distributed for one another. We receive the bread blessed and broken, distributed to us, and then we allow ourselves in different ways to be broken for the sake of others. That's the invitation. Jesus gave himself to his apostles, to all of us through that meal. And we're called to receive that, accept that, and participate in that as well. And it's a wonderful gift. It's an eternal gift, and it's a dignified gift, the ultimate dignified gift to receive and to respond to. And however we receive it, and however challenging it is these difficult times, we receive that gift in many ways. Certainly there's through the ritual of the Mass, but also there's the value of the presence of God through the proclaimed word, through receiving the Eucharist spiritually, through attending to live stream Masses, to our very presence to one another. In our daily lives, we can allow ourselves, the Christ within us, to be food for one another. So we ask God to bless us with an ever greater realization of that, and how tremendous that gift is, and that we tune into that gift. Regardless of the frequency or infrequency we can come together in this context, this is a gift. But we take that gift and go out and live our lives as God's children. Amen.